isolated question.
Wait a minute, hold on just 1 second here.
Welcome to a new episode in our series Astrology in the 21st Century. Today we have a very special guest from the United States, from Arizona, Ray Merriman. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Volker. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
And for our audience, there is a little bit of information necessary. There is a special homepage on this address. It's called astrology.vonarbisw.de, and there is a subsite called Q&A with the astrologer Raymond A. Merriman 2023. And for understanding what will be doing today, I prepared a film list. And in this film list, you, the viewers, can watch this wonderful interview done by the Kepler College a couple of days ago. And there's a second video, a long video with Chris Brennan, diving into the experience of Ray Merriman organizing conferences, and then a lot of other things. So basically, today we are sort of simulating an audience which have watched those videos, and I will ask the questions like it could have been asked by people in an audience. So let's start with the chart of Raymond. Today, the transit of Mercury is on 2 degrees of Capricorn on your Sun, and it is on my Mercury. So would you agree that if we have a transit like that, we can live with the fact that Mercury slows down? Would you agree that this is a very good transit, Mercury on Sun and Mercury on Mercury, to do this?
Yeah, I would agree with that. We should talk today.
Okay, so the first question I would like to start goes back into your biography.
Okay.
In October 1966, you were in college, right?
Yes, I was in college from 1964 to 1971.
And when you were in college, you studied a college degree, a Bachelor of Arts or Science? What was it?
It was a Bachelor of Science, and my degree was in psychology.
Did you only study psychology, or was there a second subject?
No, I started out in the School of Business Administration. After
okay.
2 years, after 2 years, I was doing well, but I was quite bored with it, and I was going through an identity crisis, like many people do around the age of 19 or 20. And I thought, I want something a little bit more exciting, a little bit more challenging, a little bit more creative. So I changed my major to psychology. I took a lot of classes in Far Eastern religion. I also did a lot of writing classes. I wanted to be a writer as well as a psychologist, but I wanted to have a background in Far Eastern philosophy as well. So I did that. I got my undergraduate degree in 1969, spent 2 years doing postgraduate studies in psychology, University of Michigan, Oakland University.
Stop right there. Stop right there. This term Open University, I was researching the term Open University. I came up with an English Open University. What is the Open University of Michigan?
Oakland, Oakland.
So Oakland, that is on the west of America.
No, that's Berkeley in Oakland, in Berkeley, California. They've got an Oakland College too, I guess. But Oakland University is a liberal arts college in Rochester, Michigan.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Now back to your time when you were undergraduate, and now I take the computer. This was the time when the revolution in the universities took place.
Yes.
Now you were there in the height of this transformation of young people. When you changed to psychology and you took these courses in philosophy and spiritual aspects, did that change your personal view of the world?
I think it came the other way around. My personal view of the world was changing in the mid-1960s. We were involved in the war in Vietnam. The United States was quite involved in it. There was a draft going on, and we were college students, and we were exempt from the draft until we graduated. So many of us of my generation were protesting. You know, we were protesting the war in Vietnam. We're protesting the government, if you will, much as like what's going on through the world today. And we actually went quite extreme. That was an age, it began with the age of the flower children. We began living communally, many of my generation. It later became hippies, which later became social activists. I was involved in marches on Washington, D.C., protesting the war, protesting or supporting civil rights movements. So it was a very active, politically active, culturally active, transformative time in the 1960s. And I grew up in that period, and it was had a big influence on me. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of excitement. It was a lot of tension too, because we knew that when we graduated, we become subject to being drafted, and we're protesting against that. In my case, I was protesting against it because I did not want to go to Vietnam and shoot Buddhists. Because
you didn't go to Vietnam. You did
no,
something else.
I did alternative military service. I was what I didn't want to fight that war. I wasn't against wars to defend your country. I was against wars that offend other countries that I didn't believe in. And this was a case where I didn't believe that this is a war that our generation should be supporting. And I was amongst many people who did that. So I filed a petition with the local draft board to be a conscientious objector, and they turned me down. And then I appealed it to the state Supreme Court, and I won under the condition I would do alternative military service in service to my country's national health, interests, and safety. So I had a degree, and I was working toward a graduate degree in psychology. I worked in what was called the war on drugs that was happening at that point. So I was hired by the National Institute of Mental Health for the Department of Social Services to coordinate a program called Project Adult, which is an adult drug use limitation treatment program, where I would coordinate, I would train people who were ex-addicts or junkies, if you will, or involved in the street life of young people, but had made it a life of their own, successful. So I trained them to be psychologists, to handle group psychology, and take the individuals who came out of the training schools, who were arrested and put in these training schools, give them coping skills with society. And I did that. I set those things up all over the state of Michigan and the different school systems. And yeah, that was my background for my 2 years I did of alternative military service. All the time I was also studying astrology and did astrological consultations as well.
Which gave you some income for your university studies, college studies, because you started counseling already during your time in college, right?
Yes, it gave me income, but it also gave me skills. You know, when I had to train people and put together programs, I had to go to a lot of different conferences myself and learn about consulting, counseling skills, how to lead groups. So that became the basis for the consulting skills training 30 years later in the International Society of Astrological Research. You know, that was part of our certification model. We wanted, if you're going to be certified through ESAR, you had to be trained in consulting skills. And it was based on the models that I developed in 1971-72 with Richard Smoot at that time. Yes.
Okay. So your studies in astrology started somewhere around 1967, is that right?
Yes, well, the context of that was 1966, when I went and worked at Cedar Point, which was like the Midwest version of Disneyland, Disney World. And I met people from all over the country who worked in that theme park with me, who were college students. And one person I met gave me the Tao Te Ching, by Lao Tzu. And that kind of began to change my philosophy and question everything I was doing in life. You know, the Book of Changes. And it wasn't long after that the next spring that I got involved in astrology. It was introduced to me by my friends who went to Haight-Ashbury. came back and said, everybody in our culture, everybody in our generation is studying astrology. That's a key component of communications, if you will, of exchange between people in the Haight-Ashbury district. So that got me interested because I'm now into astrology, I'm now into psychology, and here's a tool of almost instant psychology, astrology.
Yes, yes.
So I started pursuing it, and that summer, it was 1967, Circle Bookstore in Ann Arbor opened up, the Earlywine.
Is that this one, Michael Erlewine?
Yes, Michael and Stephen Earlywine in Ann Arbor opened the Circle Bookstore, which is one of the first major astrology bookstores in the country, and certainly in the Midwest. So I spent my summer there studying.
Did you get a personal relationship to Michael?
Yes, we were good friends. Michael and Stephen both. I was there every day, and well, not every day, maybe 4 days a week, because my alternative service was near Ann Arbor, Michigan, which worked out really conveniently. So I got to know Michael and Stephen very, very well. They're both excellent computer programmers. Michael, of course, is an astrologer, a practicing one. Stephen also was an excellent astrologer. So yeah, good relationship.
There's this wonderful video with you in this series, Leaders in Astrology, and Michael Erlewine is a participant in that series of Kepler College. And I watched that video with Michael Erlewine, and he spoke about his spiritual training, Zen, Buddha, and I realized that you mentioned in another video with you about Yogananda and Sri Yukteswar. Did you have Michael Erlewine as a mentor in spirituality aspects, or was that not so central?
No, that was not a base of my relationship with Michael. It was basically astrology. He went more into the Buddhist direction, very deep Buddhist training. Well after I met him, I don't know into it when I met him, but when I met him, I was already into Kriya Yoga in the path of Yogananda.
Okay. Yeah. So in 1972, you were the youngest who passed the AFA exam. How did you prepare for that? Did you have a school, a class, or did you all by book reading?
Well, I started astrology in 1967. I started doing readings immediately because there were no schools around at that time in my area that I knew about, which was Detroit, Ann Arbor, East Lansing, Michigan. So I studied myself for the first 1 or 2 years, began doing consultations, or actually typing out horoscope interpretations for people, and they would pay me, which helped me pay my tuition because I got quite a few people who wanted interpretations of their horoscope. So that was in 1967, 68, 69. And then in 1970, I opened, I think it was 70 or 71, I opened the Sidereal Center of Astrology, which was the first astrology public classes open to the public in the Detroit area. We had the Church of Light, but they were kind of more like a secret society. But I opened the Sidereal Center of Astrology in 70, 71, taught it for 3 years, 4 times a week. And of course, when you teach you
learn it.
That's probably the most effective way to learn astrology is to teach.
That's right.
A lot of questions.
I totally agree on that. So you taught astrology, and after a couple of courses there, you have been a teacher. You thought to yourself, "No, I do this exam with the AFA." Coming back to the Church of Light, Carol Taps is mentioning the same thing. Is the Church of Light something which is connected to C.C. Zane? Is there a correlation?
Yes. It was Rosicrucian Fellowship, Church of Light. They're all connected in Detroit. So if you took classes in the Church of Light, you were a Rosicrucian, at least in those days. And it was kind of a secret group. I mean, it was older people. At the time, everybody who was over 60, 70 seemed like an older person, elderly. And so it was a very elderly group of people. They had a background also in Rosicrucian and Hermetic and Masonic lore. They were very much into a lot of things, but they did teach astrology there too, as I understood it. I never went there. I knew people who went there because when I opened my school, several of them came and studied with me and shared their information. So I kind of learned from them too.
So you never became a secret member?
No, I never became a secret member.
Did you
I've
did
always
you
been open.
did you by chance find out what straight of Rosicrucian background was there? Rosicrucian is something quite diversified. It could be Amorg, it could be Heindel, it could be other groups. It was the
I think
Church
it
of
was
Light.
C.C. Zane and Max Heindel. I think they taught both of those
Oh, okay, good.
gentlemen's philosophies.
Now we
Yeah.
have here the text, so let's go through the short text. You became a professional astrologer since 1968. You founded the Aquarian Revelation Center in 1972. And that happened after you had organized in 1971 a conference for another organization. Do you remember the name of that other organization?
Yes, it was called AMPS, the Association of Astrology, Metaphysics, and Psychic Sciences. You know, in those days when you got involved in astrology, it was a very metaphysically broad community. If you were into astrology, you probably are interested in palmistry, the I Ching, the tarot, psychic sciences, auras. I mean, it was a whole gamut of things that we were interested in when we began our path in that direction. So probably around 72, I formed, it was 1972, 71 was the AMPS. So they asked me to organize their conference. They had a conference in Northern Ohio that would attract maybe 50, 60 people. And they thought, oh, he has background organizing events through my work with the Project Adult that I mentioned earlier with the state of Michigan. And so they asked me to organize a conference for them because they knew I was interested in astrology. I did. It was a great conference. We had 200 people, their most successful conference ever. And afterwards, they decided they didn't need me. They could do it themselves. So
Okay, yeah.
I left.
Jumping forward, which we will do, like there were questions from the audience, so we can jump back and forth. In 2000, you were working. I got this from the video with Rick Levine by this Kepler College series, Leaders in Astrology, and he said that you, Ray Merriman, were a cooperative partner with Jeff Joyer and Rick Levine in Star IQ in the time of 2000, 2001. Can you elaborate what you were doing for them or with them?
Yes, I think it was more like 1998. I remember Bill Clinton.
Yeah, that could be. And he continued it quite a couple of times.
So Star IQ was like a people's magazine of astrology, where they asked well-known astrologers at that time to write columns. And that's when I started writing my free weekly column on astrology. It was through Star IQ. And I continued doing that until around 2010, 2011. So probably about 12, 13 years. I was a contributor of the financial astrology column for Star IQ. It was a very popular column because Star IQ was very popular. I think they reached over 500,000 people at one point. They were in negotiations for a sale to a major television company, I think, that was
and then the technical market crashed and everything was gone.
That's right. I think, well, we got in toward, I think it crashed for them. Yeah, probably in 2000 to 2002. It was the internet bubble.
Yeah. Bubble. In that time, in 2000, when you were a partner with Jeff Joyer and Rick Levine on Star IQ, did you watch how they were part in creating Kepler College?
Or well, first of all, I wasn't really a partner. I was one of the leading astrologers they asked to contribute to their popular online magazine.
And you did that from Arizona?
No, I did that from Michigan. I think they did give me shares of the company if I would do that in return. They give me shares of the company if I do that, column for them. So I guess in a sense I was a stockholder.
So you weren't present in these talks with in Seattle about founding Kepler College. You were not informed.
No. I was not part of Kepler College. That was Maggie Nalbanian.
Yes,
and
the thing is,
part of that too, but I wasn't part of that because they were only using graduate students, those who actually had master's or doctorate degrees, and I hadn't completed my degree, so I was not part of that beginning process.
That's my next question. at some time in your life, you decided not to continue your graduation with a master in psychology, right?
Right. After I got drafted and had to alternative medical service from my country, I had to drop out of school because I couldn't work full time and do the college education. Plus, they moved me. I had to move over 50 miles away, so I wasn't
Yes.
near the university. So that all ended, and I just focused on being a counselor, my psychology background, and having astrology classes. And when that ended in 1974, I was already doing so well in astrology that I didn't
Okay.
feel I wanted to go back to college. I was an
Okay.
astrologer.
When you studied psychology, did you have a special? There's about 350 different psychologists on the market. The main well-known are Freud and Jung and Adler and Reich, but there's another 345 psychology straits. Did you have a favorite straight in psychology when you studied it?
Yes, I was interested in personality theory and abnormal psychology. You know, the types of labelings you might say that people are considered abnormal in psychological dispositions like paranoid, schizophrenia, neurosis, psychosis. I was interested in all that. Yeah, that was my.
Was there a sort of guru which you followed in that field? A well-known
Yeah, I
psychologist
mean,
who's
I was very interested in the works of Erik Erikson and Sigmund Freud, Carl
okay.
Jung. Those were my favorite psychologists to study at
So
that time.
there was no special guy specializing in that field which you just mentioned. That is a technical
Well, there
field
was
without
a
a.
field. There was a field that I pursued in social psychology. You know, in 1968, 67, 68, I had this belief that a subculture was forming in our society from the
Yes, yes,
flower
I know
children
that.
and the
Yeah.
hippies. Yeah. And so I was my mentor at that time to prove this or to try to prove this phenomenon that was developing as a subculture in American society was Dr. Milton Rokeach. He
Yes,
had
I
put
know that.
together,
And
yeah.
that's in all your videos. And now my question to that professor was, um, this research, did it bear fruits in the future? Was there a good reception of the results of that research? Or was it just
He
shelved
liked
and
it. No, it took me over a year, maybe almost 2 years to complete that study. I think by 1969 I completed it. Yeah, because it took a while to get 100 people to take a survey that could be statistically analyzed against other demographics of people
yeah.
who did a similar survey, did the same survey. And so when I completed and wrote it up, he wanted me to submit it to magazines, the journal Psychology Today. There's another one called Transaction. Transaction accepted it.
Is that
Psychology
Harris?
Today turned it down. Transaction accepted it, but I don't know what happened to it because I never saw it published, but they sent a letter of acceptance of they liked it and they
Oh.
accepted, but I never saw it published.
So
So
basically, that was part of your bachelor degree, this study, right?
no, this was going toward my master's degree that I never completed.
Oh, so that was a parallel state. You hadn't still the bachelor, but you were already working towards the master.
Correct, correct. That was postgraduate work.
Postgraduate work being an undergraduate, not being
No,
an.
I got my degree. I was working toward another degree and I never completed the other degree, the master's or
So it was
doctorate.
parallel work, basically. Okay. Now, if we go to the United Astrology Conferences, a lot of information is on the other videos. I saw all those videos about Carol Tabbs being the deciding chair, dissolving UAG in 1999. And then you were the leading part in giving rebirth, like Phoenix from the ashes, to continue UAG conferences. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was probably my first real disappointment in professional astrology on an organizational level. I mean, I was on the UAC board as one of 7 members. We had six directors and the main director, who was Carol Tabbs, and there was quite a discord that developed after a very successful 1998 conference in Atlanta. during the development of that conference, there was a lot of stress between the three organizations, AFAN, NCGR, and ESAR. The main source of distress was that AFAN had two directors on the UAC board, but neither of them were members or coordinators of AFAN anymore. So AFAN didn't really have any representation. And AFAN was quite angry about that, quite upset. And so they wanted things to change. And there was a split amongst the UAC board. Half of them said, okay, we don't need to have this stress. We're going to be a united conference. We can't be a disunited organization arguing with each other. So half of them wanted to dissolve UAC and go private. They didn't want to be a nonprofit involving the three organizations because it's just too much discord. And the other three of us, Jeannie Long, Monica Domino, myself, thought, no, that's not what UAC's about. It's a united conference, and it's been that way since we first began. We must stick together and work through these issues that we have and stay united with the three organizations. And we couldn't get a break of that. It was three on one side, three on the other side. Carol had to make the decision. She was the chair of the board. And she decided, I think she decided because we couldn't come to an agreement, that we may as well dissolve and let it go. So it dissolved, and the three of us, Jeannie Long and Monica and myself, were quite disturbed with that. And I was at Rick Levine's house on my sole return. I think it was 1999. I'm a Christmas baby. I'm a Capricorn. And I stayed with him because I wanted to be in Seattle for my sole return. And I had a call from Marion March, who was the Czarina, as we called her, of UAC. She's really the godmother, if you would, of astrology in UAC. And she says, Ray, you got to get this group back together. You can't let it dissolve. And she convinced me to call the other heads of the other organizations, have a meeting with them, bring them together, offer them whatever I needed to help them take over UAC with all new board of directors, were myself and Jeannie and Monica. We would resign, but we would guide them into the next conference. So we did that. I did that. I brought them together. We had good conversations. We shared our visions, plans on how to do it. Once they got off the ground, then the three of us resigned and we replaced it with other members of our organization. And UAC was rescued for 2002 conference.
That was the first rescue. Then there was a second trouble. When did that happen?
That happened after that conference, the one in 2002. So we had an October 2002 conference, and it was quite a colorful conference. I mean, you may have heard that was a conference where, God bless her soul, I love her, Erin Sullivan, had a fight with a monitor, and they couldn't resolve that fight. The police were called in. Erin was hauled off to jail, and we had to do an effort to raise monies to bail her out. And then they said she's got to go back to Canada. So there's a lot of disturbance again, right, for that conference. So again, UAC kind of went into a freezing, if you will. There was no activity. There's always another organization. ESAR was always involved. They're always supportive of UAC, but either AFAN or NCGR, one or the other, would always, be unhappy or dissatisfied with something, and they would refuse to cooperate for a while until, just for a long time.
And so who was the rescuer this time? First, you were the rescuer.
I was again.
You again?
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you do that?
Well, the main culprit at that point was probably NCGR. They did not want to get together and involved with what the president of NCGR wanted to do was have a representative involved in the meetings with the heads of the other boards, which is not a good idea. I mean, if you're going to try to get three of us to work together, you need the heads of three organizations. So there was an election, I think around 2006, and a new president came on NCGR. And it was somebody that I could work with very well, Madeline Deneen Hillis. And I thought, there's a new day here. So I got a hold of Madeline. I got a hold of Donna Van Tonen from AFAN. And the three of us get along really well. We decided, yes, let's get UAC back together. It's going to be 6 years. We were always on a 3 or 4 year basis. Now we're back together. I brought them together. We coordinated the conference in 2008 in Denver. And it was an exceptionally successful conference, and we were really united again.
So UAC was rescued by Ray Merriman again.
Yeah.
And then there was a third trouble. When did that occur?
Okay, so after 2008, the conference in Denver, and it was my second 6-year term as president of ISAR, I decided it's time for me to step aside from community service and focus on my own personal career and let the new generation come in, because we're focused on two things. We're focused on young people, and our last conference was always bringing in the younger generation to get them involved to carry the mantle of astrology. And we're also interested in international. We wanted to coordinate standards internationally, not just in America. So we focus on the international community and the youth in astrology. And then after 2008, everything was going well. Young people were coming into astrology. ISAR was strong, AFAN was strong, NCGR was strong. We had a UAC 2012 in New Orleans. It was very successful again. And then once again after that, they couldn't get it together. Whether it was AFAN or NCGR, I think it was NCGR again this time, could have been AFAN too. One of them would not meet. They just did not want to meet. They were too busy. They felt it was not worth the effort. And so in 2015, 3 years later, ISAR came to me and said, we really want to get ISAR back together and we can't get any cooperation. Would you consider coming back on the board? And I said, yeah, I'd be happy to come back on the board and help you get the next UAC going. So they had an election. I won. I was one of the people who got enough votes in the election to become on the board of directors of ISAR again. The board selects this officer. They selected me to be president. It was not unanimous because there was a schism going on even in ISAR a little bit at that point between the social, cultural, political activists and those who were into astrology. But I was brought in to do two things, I thought. One, organize an ISAR conference because they hadn't had their own conference for a while, and to bring UAC back together again. So there's two things I did. The first thing I did was call John Marcus of NCGR and Lisa Scheim of AFAN and said, look, we got to get UAC back together again. It's been 3 or 4 years, and it's going to take a couple of years to make this happen. They were all on board. I think the problem was nobody was communicating with each other. They just needed a phone call and said, let's get together and let's start this process again. And so once again, we got together and we rescued UAC, and it got off the ground.
The result was UAC 2018, right?
Yes.
And now we have the situation that some virus came along, and there hasn't been a UAC since then, right? Since 2018.
Oh, there's not been. This is the longest stint that UAC has gone without a conference. And they will have one. They're planning one now in 2026, but that'll be an 8-year interval. We've never gone beyond 6 years. And prior to that, we never went beyond 4 years. And prior to that, we never went beyond 3 years. So, yeah.
And that means you are no longer involved with the process of UAC organization, right?
That's correct. I'm no longer involved with UAC organization.
And you are no longer involved with ISAR as well, is that right?
That is correct. I stepped down in 2017 after I groomed Alexander Imsurajek to first be my vice president and then assume the role of presidency, which he took over in 2018. He did an excellent job. I mean, under my leadership, we went from 200 to 1,600 at one point. When he came on, we had about 1,200. He got up to close to 3,000. So I would say that ISAR was very, very strong through my leadership, Giselle Terry's leadership. I must give a lot of credit to Giselle because she established the standards in astrology that ISAR was supporting in terms of consulting, ethics, competency. And then under Alexander and Surgic, we had excellent leadership in ISAR. And now we have a new leadership, and we hope that they will succeed and carry on the tradition, if you will.
Why so early a new leadership? This guy from Slovakia, I believe, is a wonderful guy. Why did he quit?
Oh, his 6 years were up. I mean, I had set a precedent where you go 6 years and you step down, and he followed it. The board wanted him to stay on, but he should continue that and step down. And so he stepped down.
Now I understand that. I didn't know that he had 6 years, because I was counting, 2017, then 18, 19. I didn't see the 6 years. Okay, question. Did you participate in UAC 1992?
Yes.
Have you been in the room when Noel Teal asked Joan Quigley about the payment, how the payment was done?
No.
Oh, you didn't. This is in the video from Carol Tebbs. She told the story that Noel Teal asked Joan Quigley in the room, "How did the Reagans pay you?" And the answer was very careful. I believe something like that.
I probably was in the room, but I don't remember that.
Did you have a personal? Did you ever shake hands with Joan Quigley?
No, I did not have a personal relationship with Joan Quigley.
Okay, next question from the audience, like me. Bernadette Brady, in her video with Kepler College, quotes Patrick Curry. And I know that you might be a different opinion. Patrick Curry says, if astrology was proven statistically, it would lose its soul. Would you concur, or would you say, I don't see it that way?
I don't see it that way.
I thought so. Now, Lee Lehman was a guest presenter in one of the ISAR conferences in the 2000s, 2007, 2008, something like that, and later on the Kepler College 2008 Congress. And she was presenting astrologers are something like the gay community before it was acknowledged. Did you hear that talk?
No, I didn't hear that talk.
Oh, so you don't know about that talk on an ISAR conference?
No.
That's no problem. She compared the development of the problems the gay people had in America and how that developed, and that the astrology community is somewhat in the starting phase, like the gay people were in the starting phase. But you didn't hear that. Okay.
No, but there is some truth to that. I can see what she's talking about. I mean, it's also somewhat similar to the Black movement in society. I mean, people in society are marginalized, whether it's on race or their sexual preference. Astrologers are marginalized on a professional level. It's been that way. And I think we made an effort. We not only make an effort, but I think we made some progress in changing that society with what we did from the 1970s to 2000. We transformed, our generation transformed astrology from a hobby to a profession and a career. And so because it's still young, we had to fight through similar marginalizations from different segments of society, just like gays and just like the Black community did. Well, not just like them, but it's a similar march.
And here in this YouTube video, in the same one with Kepler College, on minute 1 hour and 8 minutes and 17 seconds, she was talking about critical thinking in the astrological communities.
Yeah.
I had the same discussion with Luis Ribeiro on our channel with critical thinking in the training for astrologers. How do you see the American astrologer community scene? How far are they open to take critical thinking as a serious condition to have if you want to be a professional astrologer?
It was improving quite a bit. I mean, this is an issue that astrologers within their own community and within society have been struggling with for quite some time. Critical thinking was not part of it in the 1960s and 70s when I came into it. It was a lot of metaphysical base, case history base, observational. There was no critical thinking where you actually went out there and tested it yourself. You had your own personal experience, but there was no quantitative studies, no empirical studies. That began to change. I think began to change a lot with financial astrology, the work that I did with financial astrology, and now with the work that David Cochran is doing with vibrational astrology. You're seeing critical thinking, you're seeing quantitative studies, you're seeing empirical studies. I think this is necessary for the profession of astrology as we make gradual progress into acceptance socially, culturally, in the world. So I'm a big supporter of the idea that we need more critical thinking. I think Lee Lehman's absolutely correct, and she's one of the people I think that does exercise a great deal of critical thinking before she gives a speech, before she gives an opinion on astrology. And I know as a professional astrology, there are many of us who are professional astrologers who wish that those who have a public personality would utilize, would incorporate critical thinking more appropriately before they speak to the press. It would really help the profession as opposed to just making bold predictions without any substance or context behind it.
When Lee Lehman was doing this video with Kepler College, the discussion came on certification, which is a very important topic in your career as president of ESA. You are one of the responsible people that this survey was done in 1995, asking astrologers what is important, and the answers were surprisingly to you and other people: ethics, counseling skills, and competence control.
And legalization.
And legalization, well, that was achieved someday in the 2000s. All states in America are now probably legalizing that astrology is a counseling profession. But the other three, ethics, let me ask you, before I come to the question about the certification problem, ethics. In Germany, we have sort of an ethic in the organizations, the German Astrologer Association and the head organization of all the German-speaking astrology associations. What is the content of the ethic rules you came in the end? Is there something like rules of ethic which are applied by all the organizations, or is it different from ESA ethics to NCGR ethics to OPA ethics to whatever organizations there are? Is there a sort of a contract between the organizations?
Not really a contract. I think when we started our certification model, ethics training and awareness became the cornerstone. That was going to be the first thing, the cornerstone, everything we did, because in the astrology community in up until the 1990s, there was a lot of disrespect amongst us. There were many good astrologers, but they didn't really have an ethics code other than you sign a statement. Most of the organizations have an ethics statement. You sign it, it's 1 or 2 pages. It's not very thorough. It doesn't really give you guidelines on how to handle yourself professionally. Yes, we know confidentiality is very important. It's probably the cornerstone of ethics. So we wanted something that was much more serious. And so Glenn Perry, Dr. Glenn Perry, who is a psychologist in America, well-known astrologer.
I have a very long video, 2 videos with him on my channel, Cosmology, Mikronährstoffe. People can watch these videos. I will put them in the video description, that if they want to see what Glenn Perry has a biography in. He was the psychologist who didn't survive the tryouts in Kepler College, I believe, because there was a lot of discussion going on when he presented his views. This ethic, which Glenn Perry was part of, what does it contain? What is ESA's ethics?
Well, he put together an ethics model, very rigorous one, based on the ethics of an organization of psychologists that he was a part of. It was based on the psychological model of ethics, the consulting skills of ethics from psychology. Okay. And it had to do with plagiarism, the importance of citing other people work. When you're going to use their ideas, you need to cite it, reference it. It's about relationships with your clients. It's about publishing activities, conducting yourself when interviews with the public, warnings against giving dire predictions that would upset people, the use of qualifiers in your presentation so that it never comes across as being an absolute, predictive, imminent, fatalistic result. There were several pages here.
In Germany, we have a topic. The German astrologers in the Deutschen Astrologenverband, German Astrology Association, are not allowed to do death prognosis. Is it the same thing in ESA?
They're not allowed to do their prognosis.
To say when somebody will die.
Yeah, yeah, that is in there too. You can't make an absolute prediction that's going to be, fatalistic like that. It was more choice-based. It's more of a choice-based astrologer. The astrologer's role is to offer, first of all, to indicate the timing of certain conditions that arise in your life, what those conditions might be, and the choices you would have and the potential results from it. It was never to be fatalistic and imminent. If it was that, then it wasn't choice-based. It was more based on empowering the astrologer. The idea with ethics, with ISAR in modern day astrology, is to empower the client by giving them the choice. They make the choice, not you, the astrologer. When you make an absolute prediction, you're taking the right away of the client to make the choice based on astrological principles. You're telling them this is going to be the result, and that's not ethical in our opinion.
So the ESA ethics is first class. How about the other organizations? Are they as good?
Well, I don't think so, because I have not seen any other organization come out with an ethics program or awareness training or manual anywhere as rigorous as ESARS. I think they all, I think a lot of them have looked at ESARS and they are practicing a lot of the things that we have in our ethics document and manual, but I have not seen an actual document from other organizations yet that reflect the kind of rigorousness that ESAR put into it.
Now, coming back to the starting point of this questioning, in the interview with Lee Lehman, she was asked about certification processes. Now, this is something ESA has. You have a certificate program. And the argument was, if somebody gets a certificate from an organization like ESA or NCCR or OPA or AFAN or AFA, like you have a certificate from AFA, that's not really the best idea. As the astrology community should establish schools, recognize schools like Kepler College or something on that level, and the exam should be done by the school, and there should be established a sort of tradition in education and not an organizational certificate. Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I'm not opposed to that in the future, developing there, but we don't have that yet. I think it's important for the schools, just as we have schools in American universities and in Europe. I think it's important that astrologers do their studies with mentors, with teachers who guide them along with their research and understanding of astrology, and they get a diploma from that school. And once you get the diploma from that school, then you take an exam by a respected body in your field, just like you have a bar exam in law, or in finances, we have our financial different series of exams in finances. The school doesn't give that certification. The body, there's a certifying body that the universities go to that you have to qualify for by studies in those universities and get a diploma to take that exam. Right now, the organizations are serving that purpose. I would hope, as Lee Lehman suggests, that the organizations will somehow get together with the schools and maybe create one international, or at least a national, certifying body that we all agree upon. That would be the ideal, but so far we're not there.
Okay. In one of your webinars, you were talking about astrology like meteorology is always right. Actually, astrology just is. And then we have your discussion about forecasting versus prediction. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, now this is something you may have a little difficulty understanding in Germany because you don't have a word for forecasting.
No, we have this in
Prediction.
Germany. We have the same word for both terms. That's right.
Correct. So prediction in, as I understand it in the English language, is just like we talked about. It's something that's imminent. It's fatal. It's fatalistic. It's something that's going to happen. 100% probability. That's the prediction. That there's no error here. It has to happen this way. Forecasting is more like probability. Like I compared it to the meteorologist. Well, there's an 80% chance of rain tomorrow. Well, that means it's probably going to rain, but it's the weatherman isn't saying it is definitely going to rain. It's a probability. So forecasting deals more with probabilities. You're working with probabilities, and the probabilities through past incidences and cases that have happened show that there's a 70 or 80% probability it's going to happen. You can make a plan around that, but you're also aware that things can change. Things can happen, that it's not going to be absolutely the way that what the probabilities say. So in my work as financial astrologer, in my work, any kind of astrology, we try to use qualifiers. And the qualifiers are, it's based on probabilities. This is the most likely way it's going to happen, but it doesn't have to happen that way. There are different things or different choices you can make along the way that could change that outcome that the probability suggests. And so we call that a forecast as opposed to a prediction.
And now I come to your webinar about the degree, the energized degree of zero Aquarius, which was where the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction happened in December 21st, 2020. And now Pluto is transiting that degree. And this was a very interesting webinar. I recommend it to watch, to the viewers to view the whole thing. I was wondering, Dr. Niederwieser in Germany, which is a colleague of yours in financial aspects and economic aspects in astrology, he did a video recently, a couple of days ago, where he did prediction, not forecasting. He did a prediction that the real estate market and the banking system will crash in the spring of 2024. That is contradictory to what you just said, right? He shouldn't do that, in your opinion.
Well, did he say that it's inevitable, or did he say that probable? That's
inevitable, more or less.
I'm surprised because I know Christoph. He's a very, very good friend.
Well, he was very clear that it's going to happen. And I was surprised too, because I know that you are on a different opinion. So let's see, I may have misunderstood him, but I don't think so, but you never know. So let's leave that open. But in your opinion, you shouldn't do that, right?
I think you should always say this more likely or probable, but not inevitable. Yes. And I'm surprised if Christoph did that, because that's not the...
Well, I might have misunderstood him, and when you next time talk to him, ask him whether I did report him correctly or whether I misrepresented him, as one can say.
Well, you may want to give an interview with him. He's very intelligent, and I think he's a very modern astrologer, modern day astrology. He believes in the choice, and I know that he's not a person who wants to be the empowered person over the client. He wants to empower the client. So I have a lot of respect for Christoph. And he's also a very good researcher.
Yes. He was working with the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg in that respect. Now, coming to your book, Astrology, the Evolutionary Astrology. I have the German edition here, because first question, is my impression correct that the English version of evolutionary astrology no longer exists on the market?
Well, the first version no longer exists, the handwritten version, the lithographic version. We've had 1,440 of those, called The Journey of the Soul Through the Horoscope. That sold out. And it sold out in 1977. In 1992, I think it was, I might be a year or two off, I wrote the second edition of it, called The Journey of the Soul Through States of Consciousness. That is in print. We still sell it in English, and it's
and this is the German translation of this second edition, right?
Yes.
First question to this about this book. Why the handwritten first edition? Was there some spiritual aspects to that?
Yeah, well, back in the 60s and 70s, we went with a lot of our intuitive feelings at that time, and or dreams, if you will. So I had an intuition that this correlation I wanted to make between Far Eastern religion, especially the concept of karma, and astrology, it should be in a handwritten edition. It should be something special. And so I started that in 1974, and it took 3 years and 3 different calligraphers to finish the work. So yeah, the first one was handwritten, 3 editions. 1977 was completed, sold out in I think 1980, 81, around that time.
1,440 books handwritten?
No,
And it's
one
not,
was handwritten. One was handwritten, and then they were all published in a lithography, I guess it is.
it was written once, not 1,440 times.
No.
Okay. And in the afterword, now it's getting very spiritual. I'm very curious whether it's correct translation by Christoph Schubert-Weller. He writes in the book, in the afterword, that this book, at least the second edition, or probably the first edition as well, was channeled. Did in the English original, was there the word channeling, or was there another term?
I don't know if I use the word channeling, but that is a good way to describe how the ideas came to me as I wrote.
Let me read it to you. I translate freely. I was sitting at my typewriter, and channeled the first edition of Evolutionary Astrology. I channeled the first edition. Okay, the question I'm asking, this is a technical term, like Alice Bailey did channel a lot of books of the Tibetan master. That was really channeling. And Jakob Lorber in Germany was the writing servant who channeled word by word. I suppose you didn't channel in the technical sense.
Not in the sense that I was in a trance. Okay, I think channeling, as I'm describing, is something that almost all writers, creative writers, go through. When you start writing something, you have an idea and you start developing it, and as you write, new ideas branch out from the original idea you started with, and you start following these different branches of thought. And as you do it, you're inspired. You get innovative. And I would call that the channeling process I went through. And I think, as I mentioned, many writers go through that in their work.
So basically, you are saying what was written is your text. It's not a text from an angel sitting on your shoulder talking to you.
That is correct.
Okay, now we are in that book in a very spiritual area, because the book is about karma and reincarnation, and basically it's part of the esoteric astrology worldwide. I was trained in esoteric astrology by Nikolaus Klein in Germany. And on page 218 of the German edition, it is possible to change your own fate. Now, the thing is, it says Schicksal in German, and Schicksal in German translates into fate, which is something else than providence. In your opinion, what did you mean in the original? Was it you can change providence or you can change fate?
Well, let me put it this way. The astrology will time conditions that arise in your life, challenges, if you will, challenging conditions that arise in your life, and you have to make a decision. That decision is usually based upon patterns, psychological patterns that you've developed in this lifetime, and I believe possibly, probably from former lifetimes, because I believe in the continuity of the soul. So there's a way that you tend to behave, that tend to react to these conditions. But when those conditions arise, you have a choice. You don't have to go by the former pattern that you've done. You don't have to stick with the pattern. You can step out of that pattern and say, you know what? Every time I act or react in that way, I get the same results, and the same conditions keep repeating themselves. So what has to change? Your choice in those situations with those patterns. You have to make a different choice. When you make a different choice, then you're stepping into an evolutionary process. you're breaking away from the pattern, you're breaking away from the karma, you're starting a new path that initiates new karma, new patterns. That's what I meant by that.
I have a series running right now, Free Will in Astrology, and this, what we are just talking about, is part of that discussion. And there was a definition of free will in astrology by Thomas Aquinas in 12th or 13th century. He said the stars machen geneigt, they tend to lean you to something, but they don't force you.
Right.
In one of the discussions I had with Dr. Gustav Adolf Schöner from Hanover, we came to the conclusion: in certain areas, the stars force. In certain areas, they make you leaning to something. And in not so small an area, you have the free will. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I believe I've always said this, the outcome of something happening in your life is a combination of your karma and the astrology going on at the moment and the choice that you make. Okay, so there is a bit of fate, because the condition comes as a result of your karma, as a result of, you know, your astrology going on your chart. But again, I do believe you have the free will to make a choice that can alter the probable outcome based on your past pattern. So I think, in respect to what you just mentioned, certain planets are a little bit more forceful to the idea of fate or providence than others when they happen. For instance, Pluto, I don't know that you have a whole lot of choice about the conditions that arise. You obviously have a choice in what you can do, you know, with the condition when it arises. But Pluto is very forceful. Uranus is too, and I don't know that you can really prepare for that other than just be open-minded to something happening that you didn't expect. But you still have a choice, but sometimes these things happen so profoundly, so deeply, so powerfully, so suddenly that you react quickly to it, or you avoid it altogether because it's too painful to deal with. And then you have the probable outcome happening, which seems like fate. But yeah, certain planets do that. If Pluto does that, Uranus does that, Saturn does. I think they're more powerful in those conditions that arise in your life, that you really have to step back a bit when it happens, think it out before reacting, because if you react, you may fall right back in the same pattern as before.
Next question. This book, Evolutionary Astrology, published 1977, second edition 1992, German edition 2013, I believe.
Reinhard
After that, you coined the phrase, I believe. Evolutionary astrology didn't exist before you published the book, right?
That is correct. I coined the phrase. I wrote the first book on it.
And then we have the situation that Mr. Green and Mr. Forrest are representatives of evolutionary astrology. Did they read your book and developed it further, or do they have a totally different approach?
Well, Stephen Forrest never knew that I wrote the book until he was well into evolutionary astrology through his relationship with Jeff Green. Jeff Green had never mentioned it. I don't know. I can't say without a doubt that Jeff Green hadn't read my book. I think he did, but I can't verify that.
You're sort of indicating there might be a violation of ethics there.
No, because he didn't. I mean, it would have, in the sense, he probably should have referenced the fact that there was an evolutionary astrology before he wrote his book in the late 80s.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Yeah, okay. I don't want to accuse anybody of violating ethics, because
no, that's me. That's me doing that.
We didn't really have an ethics document at that time, and that was one of the problems. Astrologers weren't citing other astrologers in their work that involved names or titles or thoughts that other astrologers put together. So he came out in the late 80s, I think. I produced my book in the mid 70s. So there was a time gap there.
Coming to the ethics problem and combining it with critical thinking and the point of view of an academic, which I am, I'm a lawyer from profession, and after my pension, I studied for 12 semesters, 6 years, philosophy of science. So I'm a little bit familiar with ethics in academia.
Mhm.
There was a conference in India. That was probably the last year of you were president from 2015 to 2017 or 18?
I was president 2015 to 17, but I remained on the board to 2019.
So you have been on the board of directors.
Yes.
And then one of your members of the board of directors, Dr. Glenn Perry, had
Yes.
an invitation to an international congress with Western and Indian astrologers. And he was talking about the zodiacs, the two zodiacs. And he basically told the Indian community, well, that's scientifically, you can't use your zodiac. That's not historically correct. I condense in one sentence the 30 minutes presentation. The presentation is on the internet. And then he came back to America. When I saw the videos from Chris Brennan, and I read all the papers, including the papers by Glenn Perry. He stepped down from the board of directors because of the shitstorm. Is that correct?
Yes.
What did you experience in that context? First question, isn't that what typically happens in academia? You present a thesis and you want to discuss it, and that's it. And there is no room for personal shitstorm, because that's what academia do. They present a thesis, they have their footnotes, and they say, this is my opinion because of that and that and that, and that's documented here. And that's what he did, basically. You might disagree with his thesis, and you can falsify it. According to Karl Popper, you can say, no, I falsify your thesis because it's false because of this and this and this. That's on the subject matter base. But what happened in America is an ad hominem witch hunt, which is unethical. Would you concur with me that that was a violation of astrological ethics?
You asked me, what was my reaction to this whole process, and it was sadness. Glenn Perry made an academic presentation. It was well researched, based on history, based on astronomy. He had a legitimate right, I think, to present the argument, if you will, for the tropical approach toward astrology based on solstices and equinoxes versus the Vedic or the Jyotish or the constellational system, which is based on the relationship of Earth to the stars. He was basing it on the Earth to the sun in the seasonals. So he had a legitimate argument. I do support his argument. Where he got into difficulty with the community is that they took it as if it was a condemnation of the sidereal approach that's common in India. I don't know if he was condemning it. He was just showing the difference in why the Western approach makes sense and had been resolved many, many centuries ago.
Well, he used the rigor of academia to present his thesis. That was a normal academic rigor. And critical thinking would have helped those critics of Glenn Perry to avoid this reaction, because if you are capable of critical thinking, then you realize that that was just a normal academic process. But if you are not able to use critical thinking, then you take it as a personal attack on the Indians.
And that's kind of what happened. He may have made a mistake by opening his presentation with a joke that those Hindus, those who believe in the Hindu religion, would take personally. He said something like, "There's an elephant in the room," and as you know, the elephant is a sacred animal in Hindu religion, and that right away set it off against him, and it went downhill from there. So I don't think at that point they were so upset with his initial presentation of that joke that they thought was off color in that situation, that it colored their thinking of his whole presentation afterwards. It became more emotional rather than rigorous critical thinking.
Did he leave ESA completely or just step down from the board of directors?
Yeah. Well, he stepped down from the board of directors, and he hasn't been involved in organizational work since then. He put his full efforts after that point into his own school.
In his own school, psychology, astrological psychology,
which is an excellent school,
which
yes.
People can learn in the videos I did with him, which I will put on the video description. Now, coming back to Steven Forrest, I have a quote of him, and you can click on this link, then you find the whole thing. And he says, when I was a young astrologer, most of the books and teachers I encountered were all speaking essentially the same language. There were arguments and disagreements, of course, but we all had a common vocabulary. We called it astrology, and we all meant basically the same thing by word. Then, pretty much coinciding with Neptune's entry into Sagittarius in 1970, astrology went into a period of cross-cultural expansion and fragmentation. In the Western world, there was rather suddenly a lot of popular interest and so on. And then he basically says, nowadays, if people meet on astrological conferences, there are so many fragmented subgroups that they can't communicate anymore. Do you have the same impression?
I mean, it has become more fragmented, but at conferences, we still enjoy each other's company. We still converse.
But you talk about something else in astrology because you don't understand the terminology of your partner.
I don't think it's
I'll give you an example. I'll try it out with you. I'm researching right now scientific academic research into Ptolemy, Tetrabiblos. And there is a discussion going on about the terms, the bounds of Ptolemy. Now, you don't use the bounds in your work because that is a tradition which is not part of your astrology.
Right.
And if I talk with you about whether the bounds of Ptolemy were transferred to Baghdad correctly, and if there was a Sassanid part which changed it, you wouldn't know what I was talking about, right?
Not unless you're talking about the bends, but no, the bounds I don't understand. That's true.
So basically, we too have the same problem. If I would talk about what is my main interest right now in research, finding out whether the bounds which are Egyptian or Chaldean or Ptolemaic, which one is the true one, you wouldn't know what I was talking about. And that's probably what Steven Forrest mentioned in his quote on 2012. And that reminded me of a video of Dr. Niederwieser, which is a good guy. I agree with you. His videos are very good, but I was very concerned when he did say in spring 2024 the bank will crash and the real estate market will get down. But otherwise his videos are beautiful, especially his videos about the change on the 21st of December 2020, the change from Earth to air.
Yes.
And his thesis is, the change from Earth to air means fragmentation in all aspects of satiety, subgroup, up to 1,000 subgroups because instead of one today. So the change from Earth to air, in his opinion, necessarily creates a lot of subgroups which are not really on the same page. Would you agree on his thesis that the change from Earth to air produces a lot of what Steven Forrest is lamenting?
Well, it's an interesting theory that Christoph presents. I hadn't thought of it that way. In fact, the way I look at it is a little bit different. I think as you go from Pluto ingressing into a new sign from Capricorn to Aquarius, and you're going to have Neptune going from Pisces to Aries, and you're going to have Uranus going from Taurus to Gemini, all in a short amount of time. All of that's fragmentation, in a sense. All of that's new stuff. It's new territory that we're working toward. But once you're into those signs, 5-6 degrees into it, I think it begins to coalesce around the new wave, if you will, that's emerging. And I tend to think Aquarius, with Pluto and Aquarius, I think that's very disruptive at first, but I think it's very positive too, in terms of unifying us around new technologies, the concept of using technology to do certain services, doing certain routines like AI does. I think it's going to be much more efficient. We're going to coalesce around it. It's going to change our lifestyles, it's going to change our culture. You can have a lot of people being displaced vocationally because they're not efficient as humans. We can have robots and AI doing that. So it's a big change coming up, and it's going to be very fragmented. But I think in the end, once we get adjusted and apply this in our society, it will become more unified, but in a different light. So I'm not so sure.
Basically, you are not on the side of Christoph Niederwieser, because he says this process will continue. The fragmentation will continue. There will be more fragmentation. In the end, what is necessary is a tolerance of all the tens of thousands of groups to tolerate each other, because that is the main thriving air element time period. So that's not your
if
position.
We're going to survive, if we're going to survive as a species on Earth, then we have to understand this whole concept of diversity, which ties into fragmentation too, is a subset of something bigger. And we have to just raise our consciousness to that bigger thing, which is unification. You know, we have to think in terms of being united.
Okay, so if you want to discuss this with Christo, you can ask me as a moderator to moderate the discussion.
Yes. I'm more optimistic. I think for the next, from 2020 to 2032, which I call the new era, a coin developed by Cat Powell, I think it is a very big test. But in the middle of that, we get to the Aries vortex. You know, when Saturn and Neptune come together in 0 Aries, Uranus trine Pluto, the midpoint is 0 Aries. You know, I think that's the abyss. That's the bottom of the abyss and the fragmentation. We start coming out. It's still fragmented, and it will stay fragmented until we get past the next Saturn-Uranus conjunction, 2032, which will be the Jupiter return of that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020. That returns in 2032 as Saturn conjunction Uranus. So I think we're in a big 12-year fragmentation period that bottoms around 2026, give or take a year. And I think we do start unifying after that. That's my opinion. That's my theory.
Okay. The offer stands. If you two want to discuss it publicly, I can do the moderation.
Right.
Going back to your education in astrology since 1967-68, you came about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions in your learning, obviously, because it happens every 20 years, and it is part of every book of astrology that this is an important transit.
Yeah.
Do you remember how you delineated Saturn, Jupiter in those days, and has it changed nowadays because of this change from Earth into air? Or is your position on what does Saturn, Jupiter mean the same as 50 years ago?
That's a tough question. Well, Jupiter, first of all, Jupiter and Saturn did conjunct in air. We had a pilot of that. We had a preview of that in 1980-81. And that's when I first became really aware of Jupiter-Saturn. You know, up until that point, my knowledge of Jupiter-Saturn is American was whoever was the president-elect didn't survive his term in office. He would die before he left office. That happened seven times in our history. And then Ronald Reagan got elected, and he was shot. There was an assassination attempt, but he survived. And that's when I began thinking, Saturn and Jupiter, Jupiter-Saturn in Aries in an air sign might be different than an earth sign. But then that theory was displaced in 2020 or 2000 when George Bush was elected again under an earth element, and he wasn't assassinated. He didn't die in office. So I'm not sure why it happened 7 times before. Maybe we just got better Secret Service or better national security. I don't know. But so my view of Jupiter-Saturn has been evolving since 1980, and then again in 2000, and now again in 2020. I go back and I look in history. You know, what happened the last time Saturn and Jupiter were conjunct in air sign? Well, that was in 1226. And that was the time, I think the Magna Carta, the English
around that, that's around that time, yeah.
Around that time, the whole system of laws that began to be the standard of laws throughout the Western world, and especially the standard by which the United States based its constitution. So I began to, look back in Saturn and Jupiter, and I began to see that when Saturn and Jupiter were conjunct, you had major changes of laws, at least in the United States and probably other parts of the world, but I didn't study them as much. So you think in terms of Saturn and Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter is expansive and it's, higher law, if you will, and you got Saturn, which is man's law. And the idea is when they come together, you try to find a compromise. You try to find a middle path that's not extreme, because if it's too liberal, it gets too extreme and people don't like it. If it's too conservative, it's too restricted, people don't like that. So you got to find that middle path with Jupiter and Saturn, which is a basis, I think, for laws that last, that become popular and applicable and useful to society in the long run. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. It's an effort to blend, if you will, God's law or universal law with man's law, so that we can survive, as a society, as a world body, more successfully into the future. So I'm hopeful that we will get past our divisions here in the United States and other parts of the world, where it seems like conspiracy theory is the law, that we follow more than the actual law that we pass in legislation. But I think you're going to see a lot of changes in education, in law, and new laws forming, old laws that aren't popular being thrown out and being replaced. This is how I look at Jupiter, Saturn. The eventual outcome is success through a middle path that serves the majority of people, and not just the extreme elements on the far right or far left.
In this webinar, which I've put up on the screen, with Kepler College, you mentioned that Pluto energizes this degree, which was 0 Aquarius, because of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Yeah. How far are you going? This is a cycle, Jupiter-Saturn. We have a lot of cycles. Is every cycle creating one of those special degrees? Because then you got quite a number of degrees. If you take every cycle, isn't it 45 possible cycles? If you combine all the planets?
Okay, that's a good question. I call these the supercharged degrees.
Yes.
And there are conjunctions of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Those are the most important. Those three. To me, those are the most important. And then you get into the Saturn, Uranus, Saturn, Neptune, Saturn, Pluto, but they're not quite as important. And the seventh one in that group would be Jupiter, Saturn. I would only use 7 of them. So when we look at this 0 degrees, Jupiter, Saturn, it's the first time we're entering into the Aquarius air element that's going to last for the next 7 cycles. It's 0 degrees. Pluto is going to 0 degrees Aquarius. So this makes it a supercharged degree, this being charged, if you will, by Pluto in 2023 to 2025.
Let's say it's recharged. It was charged with the conjunction in 2020, December 21st. Yeah. And now Pluto is recharging the same degree, right?
Yeah. And, these supercharged degrees can also be pre-charged. It was 0 degrees Aquarius December 21st, but Saturn had actually hit 0 degrees Aquarius in March of 2020. Right when the hysteria of COVID exploded. So we had a preview of it. Even Saturn first went into 0 degrees. Then it became, it literally charged, if you will, from an astronomical point of view in December. And every time a planet crosses that degree, it activates the themes of that planet, those planets.
And so you say you only use 7 cycles.
Yes.
And that 7 cycles would be the outer planets with each other?
Yes, Saturn, planet beyond its orbit, and Jupiter, Saturn.
And that's it? No other Saturn cycles?
Well, Saturn, Uranus, Saturn, Neptune, Saturn, Pluto.
Yeah, but not Saturn, Mars, so for example.
No, I don't use those because
you
need a 20-year cycle to have a big, powerful effect on society. I think the ones that are shorter than that, the Jupiter, Uranus, Jupiter, Pluto, Jupiter, Neptune, they're important, but I call those intermediate term cycles. They're like
do you use them as charged degrees, or do you not use that method?
I don't use that method, charged degrees, with those. I mean, it's probably something to it, but I haven't done any research or work into that. I'm only looking at the Jupiter, Saturn, and the other ones beyond it.
which borders to the question of the importance of the single degree, which is called monomoiria, I believe, in Greek. Monomoira is each degree of the 360 degrees has a special meaning. There was there was a channeling problem in that area with not Radya, but it wasn't Radya. Who did the channel?
Sabian Jones? Maybe
yeah, yes,
Jones.
right.
Yes.
That was a channeling process on the garden bench on one day for all the 360 degrees. What's your practice? Do you use individual degrees for delineation purposes, or did you never do that?
Well, I did. I looked at Mark Evan Jones Sabian degrees when I first studied it in 1967, 68. I used it for a couple of years, but then I dropped it because I couldn't get the consistency, the constancy I wanted with the images that were provided on that. So I dropped it and I went more into the field of the supercharged degrees I just outlined.
Okay. I lost obviously there it is. Now, if we go to your books, you have quite a number of them.
Mm-hmm.
This is the evolutionary astrology,
mm-hmm.
and then you have a couple of financial books. You're very successful in your financial astrology. There's probably nobody as successful as you in that field. I believe in one time you had 500 subscribers to your newsletter, something like that, or even more.
Yeah, I think we got that even now. If you take all this subscribers, all the different reports we put out, we probably got about 700.
Yes, and the newest one is Forecast 2024. First question, in this Forecast 2024, do you talk about the real estate problem and the banking problem? Is there a chapter in there?
I did in 2023, and I didn't do it so much in 2024. I outlined the economy and the effect that AI, artificial intelligence, may have upon it. But now I wish I had more time, because my thoughts on the economy are taking a shape that I wish. Well, I'm going to start discussing it in my free weekly column and in our newsletters. But I wish I would have had these thoughts that I'm developing the last couple of weeks in time for the forecast book.
As I was scrolling down, the viewers see there's a lot of books available.
Mm-hmm.
How about your solar return book? He reminds me that my time is up. You have to tell me when I have to finish.
Okay.
The solar return book is only available in the version of 2009. And it's not available in Europe for a reasonable postal cost. I wanted to buy it on your site, but the postal cost was $56, and I said, no, that's too much posting.
I know.
Do you have any possibility to have somebody in Europe to distribute this for normal European postal costs?
I wish somebody would volunteer in Europe to do it. The thing is that most Europeans don't subscribe to my theory of relocation at the time of your birth as being a legitimate construct of the horoscope.
Oh, no, I disagree with you. Most German astrologers do the solar returns at the place where the guy is, not at the birthplace.
Well, maybe they're not the publishers, though.
well, the solar return delineation practice in Germany is 90% not the place of birth, but the place where you reside at the date of the return.
Correct.
So there is an audience as far as they can read English.
Yeah. Well, there's a large audience here in the English language that subscribes to my theory, which I believe in too, is a necessity of application of astrological thought. If you believe in astrology, you must understand the horoscope is the result of an event that takes place at a specific time in a specific location. So wherever you are at the time of that event is the chart to use. That's the theory behind solar return. Why
don't you find somebody in England? Because if it's in England, the postal cost is £10 or £5. It's not $56.
Well, it's already in English. Maybe I'll try. That's a good suggestion. I didn't think about that.
I will order it as soon as it's normal.
You know what, Volker, I'll bring it with me when I come to Germany in a few months, and I'll make sure you get a copy of it.
And then you
I'll
can
talk
make
to
it.
Reinhard Steele. He published Evolutionary Astrology. Maybe he'll publish a Soul Return book too.
If you pay the translation, yes. He doesn't have the money for the translation.
Well,
that's the problem. I'm very good friends with Reinhard. The problem with English books to be translated into German is the translation costs.
Mm-hmm.
And your book will not be a bestseller in the German market if it's translated into German. So the cost of translation is too much for the publisher. So you have to find a sponsor, do a crowdfunding or something like that, and then he will publish it if you have a ready to print document in German. Mm-hmm. He will publish it right away and talk to you about the fees.
Well, very good. I'm glad to hear that. Then I'll
I'm pretty sure he will do that. But that's the same problem with Cosmos and Psyche of Richard Tarnas. He would publish it, but he has nobody who finances the translation. Mm-hmm. It's always the hurdle is always the translation, not the printing costs.
Well, we were very fortunate to get Christoph Schubert-Weller to translate it for us.
You might think about that twice because his illness is quite an obstacle.
He's not able to do it at this point.
No, at the moment, I have a video with him in my series, Free Will in Astrology, Freier Wille in Astrologie, and we had 18 minutes. I was glad that he managed to do that, but it was close. Yeah. So I don't think a thick book like that will be in his grasp. No, I don't know. Probably he can, but you have to talk about the finances with him and Reinhard. It's not my business to talk about that. I don't.
Yeah, I won't be going to Christoph because of his current condition. Yeah. And Christoph's a very dear friend too. But do we have a couple other people I can think of that might be interested in translating it?
I would love to have this published on Reinhard Steele's book publishing platform.
I'll look into that. Good suggestion.
Now we did cover a lot of things. I will not show for the viewers. If you go on this presentation, which is Kepler College Callum Wilkinson with Carol Taps, there's a lot of pictures, and you can see Raymond Merriman with hair. With a lot of hair, not as much hair as you had when you were a flower power student, but more hair than today. I think I covered what I wanted to cover. Okay, I want to ask this one. Is this a serious thing, these astrological news?
Well, I don't know where they stand right now. I mean, they were when Edward Snow was the head of it, but he stepped down a couple years ago, and I'm not sure what the status of it is now. I know Lynn Hyde and Dorothy Osha are involved in it, but I don't know what they've been producing in the last 2 years. So I don't have.
So we have to integrate Antonia because she originally wanted to participate today. This is the channel of Antonia Langsdorff, which is married to Ray Merriman, and she has a beautiful, wonderful YouTube channel for the German-speaking people all around the world. Just to mention that, she's in Germany now, right? Isn't she?
Yeah, she's in Cologne. I usually am there for about 4 months around the summer. She comes here for about 4 months, and we spend 4 months doing our own thing.
You have a sort of part-time long-distance relationship as husband and wife.
You know, the key to a relationship, as Liz Green taught us back in 2006, is to find that sweet spot between closeness and distance. And we're both Capricorns, so we need closeness, we need distance, we need to find that. We have found it. We found that spot right in between that works for us.
Okay, so basically, my last question is, as I try to not forget in other videos, did I forget to ask you something important?
Did you forget to ask me something important? Well, we didn't talk a whole lot about the financial astrology.
Well, that's in all the videos on the playlist. If people want to know that, there is 5 videos about your financial aspects and how wonderful your work is done there. It would be redundant to do the same thing here.
I understand.
People look it up in the playlist. The videos are wonderful, but you need about 8 to 9 hours watching to get the whole gist, and we don't have 9 hours today.
That's right. Well, thank you.
I can ask you one thing about your financial analysis. I was wondering, you have to decide which cycles you use and which one you don't use.
Mhm.
Was that difficult for you to decide not what you don't want to use for your work?
You mean cycles in terms of markets or planets?
Markets.
Yeah, I mean, I went to the Foundation for the Study of Cycles, looked up all the cycles they recorded, tried to replicate them, and most of them weren't working. A few did, but many didn't. And then in the process, I found others that were consistent. So that was the basis for volume 1 of the stock market timing
So
series.
you basically said to yourself, this works, this doesn't always work, I leave that out completely.
Basically, I took the ones that had at least an 80% frequency
Yeah.
of occurrence.
Well, everybody watching this video is wondering, did you get rich by trading? Using your own results.
If you're comparing me to the astrology community, I would suppose I'm wealthy. If you're comparing me to the financial community, I'm probably middle. You know, so I have a comfortable lifestyle. I'm very pleased with my life, the way it's going, and I make contributions to people that I love, that are, you know, need financial help. I'm fortunate to be in that position. So it's been a good life, and I attribute that to going to the right place on my soul returns and getting the right charts. I have a good life. That's a good part of it, I think.
Okay. In all those videos which are on the playlist, the people can learn how you got into the financial business. You were working as an employee for companies in Wall Street kind of thing. How did you experience the Wall Street people when you were an employee? Was that horrible or was that okay?
It was both. I mean, working with the fellow people in futures markets, which I dealt with commodities and futures because I was a commodities trading advisor, the other people who were on the level that I was on, it was great. My relationship with them, with other analysts, with the compliance departments of the different firms, it was okay it was really good actually with Payne Weber. It was not good with Shearson Lehman Hutton. You know, they were basically, if I may say so, thuggish. They would intimidate us with compliance, things that we want to do that other firms would allow us to do, they wouldn't let us do. They would come in and browbeat us. So sometimes it felt like I was in the camp of the enemy, dealing with the compliance issues.
Yeah.
But dealing with my clients that I had and with the other analysts, it was very rewarding and a pleasure to be with them in that community.
Was it a liberation to get out of this work camp?
Oh yeah, yeah, and I did. In 1994, I decided, I've been away from I was doing astrology. I was keeping my contacts going on with astrology, and I was still involved winning, getting awards in astrology for my professionalism. But I missed doing the research, and I missed teaching, and I missed writing on astrology. So I took the bite. I mean, I swallowed hard and says, okay, I'm going to leave this good profession. My wife at the time didn't like that idea at all. I was leaving the brokerage community, the Wall Street community, and going into my own business. But I did it. And after 2 years, I was making as much, if not more money than I was in the financial community.
But in the financial community, in the heights of the earnings, when these people were earning a lot of money, and the bonuses on top of that, in the movies from Hollywood, you get the impression every trader earns at least $200,000, and the good ones earn 1 million, and the very good ones earn 10 million a year.
Yeah.
Can you give us a glimpse? What was your highest income in that time when you were in the Wall Street companies? Was there a time when you had $500,000 a year?
No,
not that much.
I would say maybe $250,000 was my highest.
That was your highest.
1994. Had I stayed, I probably would have. But back at that time, if you were doing $250,000, well, I was doing more business for the company, but my own income was probably in that area that I just mentioned. And that was considered probably the top 10%. That would always earn me the status of being invited to their special retreats where they would have special lectures and entertainment for us. But in 1994, it started changing. They didn't want you to come up with ideas. They wanted you to sell their products, bring in money from your clients so they can make money on the money that you park in the account. So when they started pushing me into that area and not coming up with my own ideas, which my clients wanted, that was the reason I left too. But the main reason was simply I was missing doing research and writing and connecting with the astrology community. I love the astrology community. I love astrologers, and I miss that.
And then in 2011 or 12, you started your own academy training other people.
Yeah, that's right.
To continue your work, and you can retreat a little bit. And they do the work now. I believe some of your newsletters now, your financial newsletters, are done by, are they employees or are they partners?
They're contractual employees. We contract them to write the analysis. So I don't do much analysis. What I'm doing is mentoring them. I train them to be analysis and my methodology. They write the reports. I review, edit, make modifications to the reports, whether it's a monthly, the daily, the weekly. But they write the reports now. I edit them and mentor them. And so we paid them a good fee, for their work. And
how many graduates of your training are there?
Let's see, I would say right now about 40, and we're going the second year of the next group, going to be about 20 in that one too. So we'll end up with around 55 or 60 by September this year.
So there will be 60 small Ray Merrimans around.
Yeah.
Is the market big enough for so many good analysts?
Well, they're not all going to be analyzed. A lot of them are doing it because they manage their family portfolio. They work at banks, they work in trading desks. I would say.
So how many small Merrimans will there be if you discount the private?
Right now, about 7 or 8, and at the end of the next year, I would say we're going to have another 3 or 4, probably about 12.
So 12 people doing what you did.
Yeah.
Is the financial astrology large enough to nourish those 12?
Merriman Market Analyst is. We do
enough. Yeah, as long as they stay in your company, that's okay, because that's your business, and you profit from all that business agglomerate and the organization you created. American Market Analysts. We haven't shown the homepage. We have to show the homepage. Sorry about that. We have to go back and look for the homepage. You have a homepage, and let me find the homepage. Books. Jesus.
There it is. Oh, you had it under books. If you go to that one under books, you'll get it there.
Yes, there's the homepage. I have it with the books. That's right. That's right. Now, if you go to this homepage, you find all the information you haven't heard in this video yet.
And there's a button. Homepage. That's the books page, but
there's the education button. Oh, that cannot be found. You have to work on your homepage. Then there is the all button.
Probably loading the next course up.
Yeah. Basically, this is the homepage, MMA, and the address is mmacycles.com. That is your business homepage. Right. Where people can find you.
Correct.
How long do you intend to continue working till you die, or is there a perspective of retreating completely from this company?
Well, Volker, I'm a Sun, Moon, and Mars in Capricorn.
You stay on till you die in your boots.
I got my first Vedic astrology reading by Chakrapani. He looked at my chart, and the first thing he said was, "Oh, you're not going to die in your sleep." I said, "Oh, no." He says, "But not to worry. You're going to die working and you'll be happy." I said, "Oh, that's wonderful."
Okay. So again, did I miss to ask an important question, or did we cover what you expected me to cover today? I think
you did a very thorough, complete job. Excellent work, Volker.
Okay. So I thank Ray Merriman in Arizona, and I thank the viewers for stopping by. Till next time. And I stop the recording.